Hi, everyone. Today we'll talk about chapter 17. So let me up the slides and we can go through them. Sorry, not that. Okay. All right. So in chapter 17, we're talking about the implementation of our strategic plan. Uh, at this point, we're focusing on the introduction of the product. So if you think about the product lifecycle, when you're talking about product development, we've developed a product. Now we're introducing the product. Eventually, you go into growth, maturity, and decline, but that's really something you'll cover in other classes. The interesting thing here is you're seeing sales are finally starting to go up, the product's available, and you've reversed the profit decline. So when you're developing a product, you're just losing money. But in the introduction stage, now you are starting to make some money. You still haven't caught up with sales, but over time, you will start to break even. Now, if we zoom in here, there's some subsections of this introduction stage. This includes the pre-launch, the announcement, and the beachhead. So the beachhead is really where you see this sort of spike in expenditures, and then early growth is where you start to see the sales take off. All right, so the pre-launch is a stage when the firm is building a capability to compete, and this is usually when you have pre-announcements, any sort of signals or leak of information. So game companies do this all the time where they do a pre-announcement of a new system, an Xbox as an example. That they might do this at a conference, and it enables developers to start working and start developing new games. Beachhead is, this is actually interestingly, the name is a military metaphor, but it's really to get the ball rolling. So you have this big rising expenditure. The products out there, you're shipping out to retailers like Walmart and Target. That's all expensive. You make the key announcement. All right. So now the product is available. Go to your local retailer, again, Target, Walmart, local stores, and you can get it. Go to Amazon, get it, right? It's available. It's expensive though, but you can do a lean launch at this stage, and that can help with this. So, what is a lean launch? That's where you have a flexible supply chain that allows for the firm to respond rapidly to sales changes. So the firm doesn't really commit to much inventory at first, but it can ramp up pretty easily. So it's sort of got a system in place that it can make, and it can order new supplies when needed. It gives them a firm flexibility, but it does really rely on good, up-to-date IT systems so that they can track sales and they can put orders in right away. Some companies you might be familiar with that do this. Dell, sort of infamous for their one-day inventory, so that way they don't have to have just computers sitting in a warehouse. But what they do have is a very efficient way of putting together their laptops. And Benetton does this for their products as well, where they're really waiting to get orders and then they design their products. Postponement can help drive lean launch, and this refers to delaying the finalization of a product form until the last possible moment. So reduces lead times, it minimizes uncertainty, and increases operational flexibility until the demand is more certain. It's really two categories of this. Timed postponement. This is where you're deploying inventory as late as possible. So again, you might have a final design, but you're not actually sending out the products until they're ordered. Form postponement goes a step further where you don't even have the design finished yet. You're just waiting until the orders come in. And you can do this if you're a company that lets customers customize their products, then by default, you have to be postponing the final form until the order comes in. So lean launch, what it can do is it can support launch timing. Now, the timing is difficult due to differing demands like management, manufacturing. One risk is a late launch, and what can happen here is that you might miss an opportunity, and it can mean you miss your sales potential. On the other end of this is an early launch, where you launch without enough information, and so you don't actually know what customers want. It's interesting. There's a lot of examples of modern products, modern smartphones, for example. There are earlier versions of smartphones that are available in the 80s and 90s, but customers didn't want them yet, right? And so even when they did come out, they failed, right? And then many years later, then companies came along and said, "Oh, you know what? Now we know what customers want with a smartphone." You also need to motivate distributors. So distributors are your resellers. They're interested in unit volume and margin. They want to reduce costs. They also want to see what the distributor has an attitude to certain brands. They have relationships built in. Let me give you an example. So I think I've mentioned before, I used to work for the Boston Beer Company, which makes Samuel Adams. Now, the law is in the alcohol industry is that producers of alcohol cannot sell directly to the end business, which would be a bar like Cobblestones here in Lowell. So what they do instead is they sell to a distributor. So all the beer makers, the hard seltzers and hard iced tea, all of those, they make their products and then they send them to local distributors. In this area, one of those is referred to is known as Merrimack Valley Distributing Company. Most of you would not know the name of Merrimack Valley Distributing, but they will take in all the products and then they sell them to Cobblestones and all the other restaurants and stores. So you can imagine having this middle company here, this middleman, literally, you really do have to have a strong relationship with that distributor. Otherwise, they're not going to sell your product. So there's a lot of relationship building that goes on here. And honestly, a lot of it is making sure that if they take on your product, that they are going to be profitable. Now, when you do introduce a new product, there are going to be some barriers to trial, which means that customers might not actually try it, even if it's a good product. The customers might not lack interest. They might not believe your ads. In a lot of cases, they're not looking for a new product. They're complacent. They're tied to a competitor, so they really aren't looking around. There's not a lot of opportunity to use the new product, or frankly, it's just too expensive. So how do you do this? Well, you need to communicate some sort of relative advantage, but then you also need to communicate that the product is compatible with how people have used other products in the past. Right. So smartphones, the important thing when phones came out was that they were easy to use. Yes, they had more capabilities than Blackberries and things that came before them, but they were also very easy to use, which means they were compatible with people's expectations at that time on what they could do with a smartphone. Okay, so that is chapter 17, very brief chapter. As always, if you have any questions, please let me know. Okay, thanks.